Believe none of what you hear and only half of what you see. Hello everyone, it's me, Robin. Welcome to None of What You Hear, a new podcast that explores the darker stories of pop culture legend and lore, and asks some of the questions we all have about what makes them tick. With a dry sense of humor, of course, because I'm the only me I can be. And right out the gate, I just wanted to tell you what an amazing response we've gotten so far after episode 1. I am just truly so grateful to all of you for taking the time to listen. You know, it's one thing for me to sit here on the other side of this mic in front of my computer and tell you a story about something I find interesting and want to learn about, but it's a whole other thing to hear back from you guys that I'm making something you tell me you truly enjoy. So that's huge, and it means a lot. Your feedback is invaluable to me, and I'm looking forward to hearing whatever you'd like to share. If you guys have ideas for topics or anything else, I'd love to hear from you at nowyouhearpod@gmail.com or at nowyouhearpod on Instagram and Twitter. And you can rest assured I'll keep tossing that content your way. So as far as content, as you know, we talk about the dark side of pop culture around here. And while that often means looking through our favorite celebrities' closets for skeletons like we're in an Ed Gein bling ring, it also means we take a look at the stories behind the movies, books, and shows we love. Things like the legendary Lufthansa heist that was featured in Goodfellas, and the Travis Walton alien abduction story from Fire in the Sky are totally on my radar and list of things to talk about. So, in the spirit of getting the story behind some of my favorite new train wreck documentaries and Netflix binges, and I'm guessing some of yours too, considering the massive amount of acclaim and success Inventing Anna has been enjoying as of late, today we'll be talking about her story, as well as two others that are closely related, a three-headed hydra of their own making, spawned in the depths of social media and the millennial ideals of the personal brand. A story of hustle as New York as the song that mentions the name of the city twice in its title and nothing else. And I bet we'll cross paths with some pop personalities along the way. So, what happens when a Pharma Bro, a Fyre Bro, and a Fake German Heiress walk into a bank? Well, it's a little ditty I like to call, If You Can Fake It Here. Our story begins in a nondescript hospital room. Anywhere USA, everything smells like that urine-colored Dial soap, you think. But you're sensitive to weird smells right now anyway, more than you normally are. And as the saying goes, better safe than sorry. So you're here quite a bit later than you'd like to be, because you're already looking toward another busy one tomorrow. You've had a terrible lingering headache for a few days, and just one hell of a time getting through today anyway. Particularly at the grocery checkout, where it took you actually 5 minutes to complete the ever so many steps necessary to run your debit card. And something is just off, like, you just know. Your husband half cross-eyed thumbed through an issue of Sports Illustrated that was relevant about 3 months ago. He's been working doubles for weeks to get ready for the baby. And finally the doctor comes in with the anticipated results of the stat blood work. They still need to run some more tests, but chances are likely you have an infection caused by a relatively common parasite. But it's not great at this late stage of your pregnancy. You fill in the blanks around her effort to be diplomatic. It's bad. Your mind immediately flashes to your mother-in-law's pork chops over the long weekend. I thought they were pink. Didn't I say they were pink? I knew they were under. Oh, everyone worries like that with the first one, she says. Back in my day. And hubby bites the corner of his lip as the doctor continues. It's called toxoplasmosis, and it can cause some complications, including some birth defects, and, well, we don't really have to go into that right now, because there is a treatment. In fact, you'll need to be closely monitored for a while, but it's a simple 4 to 6 week antibiotic course. But there are some new concerns with the treatment. There's a bit of a catch. It's a very pricey antibiotic called Daraprim. Normally, the full course would run you about $405, easily paid by most insurance companies. But as of a few weeks ago, the price has gone up to $750. And there's a chance, a pretty good chance actually, that your husband's insurance plan through work won't cover it. But they should be able to cover about 400, right? I mean, we can make the rest. We have... The doctor extends a hand to gently interrupt. 750 per pill, she continues. The total course of treatment will cost approximately $22,500 at minimum, if you're making good progress in 4 weeks. You go numb. You focus on a small crack in the hospital tile and settle into your new mantra. We just do what we have to do and worry about it later. We just do what we have to do and worry about it later. And just about then, a young business executive stumbles into his Manhattan apartment returning from a dinner engagement that extended well into the late evening. Partially due to the fact that this privileged executive was able to put on an impromptu listening party for the yet unreleased and fabled album The Carter 5 by Lil Wayne. And they say you can't buy friends. But if you're Martin Shkreli in 2015, buddy, you can buy pretty much anything. Including and especially a $22,500 dinner for some friends at a new Manhattan hotspot, because you just single-handedly raised the price of a drug called Daraprim 5,000% overnight. Martin Shkreli was born in Coney Island into modest means. His parents immigrated from the Shkreli region of Albania, where it's customary to adopt the name of the region out of pride. I bet that caused some confusion at roll call, am I right? But he was a gifted kid. He attended an advanced placement high school and landed a prestigious Wall Street hedge fund internship at the age of 17. He spends the early 2000s doing finance stuff for financial finance people. All the company names and titles and projects are probably pretty interesting to some of you Wall Street buffs out there, but the mere mention of a short sell, a day trade, or a long john renders me glassy-eyed, and I just kind of start thinking about soup. No judgment, different strokes for different folks. Anyway, he pretty quickly finds himself in the midst of some pretty shady dealings with regard to insider trading in the pharmaceutical industry, and gets pretty adept at some pretty elaborate money funneling schemes. Kind of like the old-time saying about robbing Peter to pay Paul. But this is more like robbing Peter to pay Jed the money that Jason owed Letitia, which Janice had borrowed from Paul. And all that catches the ever-watchful eye and attention of the Securities Exchange Commission. Which is one finance term I do know, and it's basically like the FBI, but just for money. Overall point being that Martin was crafty with a high-stakes 3-card Monty. And particularly adept when it came to loopholes and rule bending within the pharmaceutical industry. In 2011, he founds a company called Retrofin, which has its stated mission to create treatments for rare diseases. The company then gains massive notoriety by discovering a cure for Brady Gronkowski malignant melanoma, and Martin Shkreli wins the Nobel Science Prize. Thank you for listening. Catch you next week. Yeah, no, unfortunately that's not exactly what happens. See, the actual goal of Martin's new company is to capitalize on a piece of 1983 legislation called the Orphan Drug Law that provides tax incentives to drug companies who research rare diseases. So the swindle is to buy up all the drugs that are needed by a relatively small number of customers, ridiculously jack up those prices, then bank on the insurance companies to eat the massive costs. And Martin is definitely not the first. In fact, this kind of thing has been going on for years, to the point that it actually raised a few congressional eyebrows in the mid-2000s. And they did take action. They held a hearing, and they talked to the dudes. I mean, they did a total hearing, and they asked these guys, what's up with that? Now, I don't know how all this works and how people pay the consequences related to attending a congressional hearing, but as far as I can tell, not much else happened. The laws and the loopholes are still very much in place to make similar price gouging a thing for many years to come. And our newest acquaintance, Mr. Advanced Copy Shkreli, he was just the latest to jump on the bandwagon. He's eventually booted from Retrofin, but he proceeds to test the bounds of the pharmaceutical price gouging game with his new company, Touareg. And here we are. And so is our little growing family from Anywhere USA, as well as thousands or more pregnant, HIV/AIDS, cancer, and other at-risk medical patient groups who are just in a state of shock at not being able to afford their necessary medication. But for Martin, the price gouging is just kind of a side hustle. Because see, Martin Shkreli's real life purpose seems to be professional troll. He spends most of his day live streaming himself sitting in a room and shooting the breeze with whoever, and for the most part, well, he's just kind of mean, rude, and humiliating to them. It's his meat and potatoes. He loves to be hated. And when the media calls him out about his price gouging, he brushes it off by citing some of the old orphan drug languaging, and then quickly pivots the conversation toward himself by way of mocking and smugness. Because as long as it's all about Martin, for better or worse, and typically worse, who has time to even think about the real victims? So we leave Martin to sip at his first cup of battery acid and jumpstart his webcam and social media handles for what is sure to be a long day of abusing a willing public like a sadistic blackjack dealer with a stacked deck. And we begin the next part of our journey to find a young New Jersey entrepreneur who decides he has had quite enough of his college freshman life and has much bigger ideas for himself and the world. Billy McFarland takes his final trip over or under the Hudson to make New York City his primary base of operation for his new business venture, Magnesis, as it's pronounced, or Magnesis, as it's spelled. It's like a credit card that also functions as a key to the city. Only it's much more than a credit card. It's a status symbol for trust fund millennials. And it offers amazing membership perks like highbrow champagne meetups, velvet rope club access, and swanky hotel discounts, as well as an all-time pass to the exclusive Magnesis Townhouse, the 24-hour networking hub and postgraduate frat party. Magnesis was also so much less than a credit card in that it wasn't really a credit card at all, but it could be easily linked to your existing card. And damn, did it sound loud when you dropped it on the table for bottle service, or at the front desk of the James Soho after the resulting all-nighter. It was so loud, in fact, that you could almost hear it all the way across town at the internship desk of Purple Magazine, where a young woman decides it's far too little in her life to simply edit the photos of the lives of the beautiful people portrayed in the magazine she works for. She actually wants to start living that life for herself. An admirable aspiration, right? For anyone. Totally something to strive to achieve. No, that's not quite what she had in mind. Like, what she's saying is that she actually wants to, pause, or better yet, just flat out quit the life she has and literally start living the life that she wants. Like, tomorrow. So she not only quits her job, she also unceremoniously completely turns her back on a life that really never did her any favors anyway. And that takes some guts. And Anna Sorokin from Germany via Russia might have to answer some tough questions about a brash move like that. But German heiress Anna Delvey doesn't have time for your questions. In fact, who are you to be asking questions or even talking to her in the first place? Do you know someone? No? Yeah, she knows you don't. Anna Delvey knows everyone, so she most definitely knows that you're no one. And in the deep inner circles of socialite New York, Anna begins day by day to find herself closer to the center of. That's actually quite an attractive quality. Everyone suddenly seems to want to be Anna's no one. But how does Anna Delvey go from being a fashion magazine intern to running in the hermetically sealed inner circles of New York City socialite culture in a matter of months? The people we're talking about don't really open the books to outsiders. Money doesn't really impress them too much necessarily either. Money is cheap, and even if Anna actually didn't have it, she most definitely portrayed that she did. No, what these people really respond to is power. So if you can walk into a room like you're the only person meant to be in that room, and portray that you're enough to buy anyone or anything in that room, that's power. So the image of power becomes Anna's power. She takes owning it to a whole new level. Anna Delvey's life depends on it, because if she fails at this, which isn't an option, she has to go back to being Anna Sorokin from nowhere. So she completely commits to the part of wealthy German heiress, with a $60 million trust tightly managed by her controlling father. But the ruse serves a definite purpose, and there is an endgame here. The Anna Delvey Foundation. A private members club geared toward practitioners and patrons of the arts on the grandest scale. The 6th-floor church missions house, an absolutely beautiful building in the elite Gramercy Park neighborhood of Manhattan. It would house studios, galleries, pop-up shops, restaurants, and even a German bakery. It would make the Soho house look like the Elks Lodge. The idea becomes her obsession and her purpose. And every astronomically priced designer outfit, high-ticket hotel room or $100 tip, every cocktail party, nightclub bottle service, or celebrity fitness training session, and even the private jet she was able to book in order to attend a highbrow networking event with Warren Buffett and Bill Gates in attendance, is all laser-focused on making the connections and creating the image of someone who could make the Anna Delvey Foundation dream a reality. And of course, raising the capital for it too. So think of a version of the scenario described with Martin earlier. A high-stakes 3-card Monty, but more socialite than stock market. I won't get into the minutiae of exactly how she was able to run her long and short cons here, but it relied on some creative banking and generally projecting the image that money means so little to you that you can't really be bothered with paying for things. Which sounds silly, but the way Anna was able to pull it off for a time, it was pretty effective. First of all, you rely on people like Martin Shkreli and Billy McFarland, who are so eager to impress a charismatic wealthy heiress like you, they'll foot the bill just for the privilege of the hang. I mean, it's New York. We're all trying to make connections, so if Anna's got all the connections, then you just look at it as an investment, right? You never know where opportunity's going to come from. Then there's more of the long game. You take really good care of the little people. The people who can get you anything and make big moves under the radar, well, they'll cover you enough to keep the management off your back. And then when you finally do get cornered to settle up, you just act ridiculously offended and put out at having to pay your $2,000 restaurant tab or $12,000 hotel bill. I mean, money's not an issue for Anna, and the more you make a big deal about this, the more you kind of embarrass yourself. And who wants to go up against powerful people? That's just trouble for everyone, right? But there are only so many boutique hotels you can wear out your welcome with, even in New York City. And sometimes Anna has to resort to staying with friends. And friends in situations where people are just looking for a leg up. In fact, friends throughout this whole story is a word that's encompassed by bold quotation marks. We've actually already briefly met one of these friends of Anna's earlier. And when we catch back up with young Billy McFarland, it's not too long after he ends up striking out with Magnisis. Anna's been crashing at Billy's new party house for a bit, and as they sit and nurse last night's resulting relentless hangovers, Billy tells Anna all about some new ventures he's up to that have the word fire spelled with a Y for some mysterious reason that is still unknown to this day. Fyre Media is an app that will let you cut out the middleman and let the average Joe book entertainment acts like, well, spoiler, it never really got as far as to get to the actual talent, due to a massive dumpster fire, with a Y, that I'm definitely getting to. But think of the app Cameo. Just instead of a happy birthday video made with a celebrity's phone, you actually book the celebrity to hang with you or take selfies or perform, whatever their particular offering or talent. Like I say, it never really got that far. Because the idea was to skyrocket Fyre Media with an event launch of only the most epic proportions. And we'll be rubbernecking the whole 50-car pileup on that when we come back. Your social media is ablaze with a plain orange tile that you've scrolled past probably 30 to 50 times by now. If you follow all the most influential influencers, which of course you do, FJ Media is counting on it. They know that your feed is chock full of perfectly cultivated talking heads. So, if it was suddenly tiled up all orange, you would have absolutely no choice but to stop and see what the F Jerry is going on. So just way too curious, intrigued, and reeled in, you finally click and follow the link to a super slick promotional lifestyle video. White sand beaches, jet skis, yachts, and real-life supermodels running around, swimming and partying in a beautiful, idyllic tropical location. Even that rapper from a few years ago, what's it now? Oh yeah, Ja Rule. The whole presentation is nothing if not 100% sexy. Well, as the promo continues, it turns out this is not just a documentation of a party that happened, but also one that is yet to come. And you are invited to the most exclusive music festival on the planet. Calling it the new Coachella would be selling it way too short. There's never been anything like this in the history of everything. Or so you're sold. And the FOMO kicks in hard, which marketing is also counting on. Models, influencers, even Kendall Jenner begin to spread the word through that bright orange tile, and it's all over the socials, almost as if they weren't getting paid for it. It's an irresistible lifestyle pitch directed at millennials who check their Instagram feed only about 35 times an hour. There was no resistance. I mean, it's on Pablo Escobar's private island, for crying out loud. Only the Pablo Escobar people specifically told them they couldn't say anything about Pablo Escobar. So it's not on Pablo Escobar's island anymore. So find me a new island, Billy says. I'm not getting bogged down on details like this. Eventually the orange tiles begin to be replaced with the talent schedule. Pusha T, Tyga, Blink-182, Major Lazer, Disclosure, Migos, Lil Yachty, and the list goes on and on. Think Coachella meets Vegas EDM with the big hip-hop element. And also Blink-182 for some reason. Maybe nostalgia if you look at the target market. The music was the worm, but the hook was the tiered accommodation packages that complement the lifestyle image. They ranged from the lodge package featuring upscale tents akin to a miniature yurt with a boutique hotel room inside, to the villa package on a resort-like beachside bungalow. And then some add-on perks like a $10,000 yacht party with Kendall Jenner. And those are just a few of the many options sold at predictably ridiculous prices. And since the whole thing is completely reliant on social media hype, all the verified influencers will lodge for free. So get your designer jeaned button gear, because this is happening in only like 3 months. And tickets are selling faster than fidget spinners. But it's a different story on the island. And the locals enlisted to assist with festival preparations there mused that there was absolutely no way this thing was ever going to happen. Especially not on the timeline allotted. But Billy and his ego just shrugged all that off, and Ja Rule actually served as a lot more of a hip-hop hype man to Billy than vice versa. All packages were sold with airfare to Great Exuma, lodging, food, and event admission. Basically, they wanted to charge you for anything they possibly could up front, under the cloak of convenience by having them organize it all for you. And as the date drew closer, they even began to tout this was going to be a cashless event. So just send them any money you wanted to spend, and they would hold it in escrow in exchange for a wristband you could scan to make any purchases you needed. But that was only when things started to get particularly dire on the compressed timeline. And it became necessary to find innovative ways to collect any potential revenue as soon as possible. Ideally before the festival even happened, so that they could, continue with the possibility that it actually stood a chance of happening. As the preparation window began to narrow, some keen observers caught a whiff of something rotten Fireside. A website called FyreK.com was started as a whistleblowing effort to alert the public to the disconnect between what Fyre was selling on their end and what actually seemed to be happening on the island. And back there, locals worked around the clock to set up tents, festival fencing, seating, accommodations, check-in booths, and I'll just stop at everything. Just about everything still needed to be done. And we're only now a couple days from showtime. So as the excited festival goers began to pack their sunscreen, tiny headbands, and clear the shelves of anything labeled bohemian at Anthropology, the rains began to fall on Great Exuma. I just listened to that back and it kind of sounded metaphorical, but what I mean to say is that a giant tropical rainstorm literally completely soaked the festival grounds. And as the sun rose on the infamous Fyre Festival Day 1, it revealed open tents filled with inches of standing water and soaked air mattresses. And by now the word was also beginning to leak worse than the FEMA tents that awaited the unknowing guests. Shortly after the first planes touched down, the eager guests are quickly corralled off to a beach some distance from the grounds to have tequila funneled down their throats. For about 6 hours, by many accounts. As if that would be enough to stall and gain back the weeks of needed preparation. Eventually, guests arrived to find their waterlogged, substandard accommodations and complete chaos at the abandoned housing development hosting the festival. Maybe this would be like an island Woodstock. Anyone that could find cell reception started to send word through social media. The artists started to drop as they heard about the impending train wreck. Blink pulled out with pretty much all the other artists falling like so many subsequent dominoes. The official statement was that they felt as though they would not be provided with the basic essentials that they would need to provide their fans with the quality of performance that even met their minimum standards. And that was just the start of the disappointment and confusion for the people who'd paid thousands to be here. Self-service baggage claims via wide-open shipping containers, people looting toilet paper and wet air mattresses, and the infamous FEMA tents. Now in mainland USA, you just bug out and take an Uber to a nearby hotel or Airbnb, right? The fact that cell coverage was spotty on the island was no small oversight for a festival that counted on social media every step of the way. And even if you could find a pocket of service, any kind of rideshare or even taxi was hard to come by. Not that it would do you a bit of good, because in conjunction with Fyre was the National Family Island Regatta, billed as the world's best sailing event going since 1954. Every hotel, timeshare, and vacation rental on the island was completely booked out. The doe-eyed would-be festival goers were stranded castaways. So as the sun set, completely exhausted by what it had witnessed in Great Exuma that day, many stories describe a Lord of the Flies type atmosphere by night. And that was when a humble, soggy cheese sandwich in an unassuming styrofoam container made its viral way around the world. For all the orange tiles, models, and millions, that was what became the ironic, iconic image associated with Fyre. Then Billy, Ja Rule, and the entire team near and far finally broke down and announced the official cancellation of the Fyre Festival. The evacuation takes over, and everyone begins their long, exhausted, and embarrassed journey home. As some of the weary travelers settled back into the comfort of their first home-cooked meal, New York hotspot and 11 Howard Hotel restaurant Le Cuckoo was hopping. At a large table in the back, the who's who of young New York socialite class were abuzz with conversation. Some of it even smug judgments about the epic Fyre failure. Anna Delvey validates her friend Billy's intentions but criticizes his ability to execute. Some of the others ask one of the larger-than-life personalities at the table about his $5 million bail and upcoming trial. No, not Macaulay Culkin. The other guy with that cocky Weasley vibe down at the end. He shrugs off the possibility of jail for the securities fraud charges he's up against, stemming from his hedge fund days, and pivots the conversation towards some of his more high-ticket and impressive purchases of late. First of all, there was the one-of-a-kind Wu-Tang album, a dystopian expose about the future of music as an art form. And the irony was completely lost on Martin that it was owned by a price-gouging pharma exec. And then there was his brand new Bugatti, previously owned by rapper Lil Wayne. The rapper had accidentally left an unexpected surprise in the vehicle when Martin purchased it. A studio preview copy of his yet unreleased and mythically anticipated album, The Carter 5. He then previews the album on his phone, the good times ensue, and as the night comes to a close, Martin Shkreli is happy to pick up the tab and get a chance to hang out with Anna, who he later said made him look like a computer geek by New York City social standards. And Anna makes her way back upstairs to her room from the popular restaurant where this composite of probable events may have occurred. Looking like another busy day tomorrow, and it's already way too late. Funding for the foundation is miraculously close. She could really be pulling this thing off. Using the Photoshop techniques she became adept at back at Purple Magazine and some crafty sleight-of-hand emailing that employed a staff of alter egos, all played by her, enabled her to prove her collateral assets by forged documentation. The $60 million trust that would bolster her ability to get the needed capital to make ADF, her dream, a reality. But there was just one catch. The bank that was finally prepared to lend her the $22 million she'd need to get the Anna Delvey Foundation off the ground would just need to meet with her financial people overseas in person, just to verify everything was in order. And the problem, as you guessed it, was there was no one overseas. No family office, which is an insider term for a company or organization that exclusively manages wealthy people's money. And certainly no $60 million coming her way now, soon, or ever. At least for the purposes of our story here today. So since in the end was near, Anna decides to go for one last blowout. An all expenses paid, but paid by who was TBD, trip to the most exclusive resort in Morocco. Her hotel swindle game is down to an art, and she knows how to string these people along. Or at least long enough to have one hell of a send-off for her dreams at the foundation. She brings along a couple close friends. Now is a good time not to forget the quotes around that word. Vanity Fair photo editor Rachel Williams and celebrity fitness trainer Casey Duke. And she hires a videographer to capture it all, as the making of the ADF. So on airfare fronted by Rachel because Anna was busy in meetings at the last minute for the flights to be booked, they made their way to Marrakesh. And good times were had by all, save Casey, who got foodborne illness and had to take off early. Only things aren't as smooth with the don't have time to give you payment, but why would you bother me with such trivial details anyway? Technique that had worked in the past. So she lets Rachel Williams know that her card is on travel lock, and would she mind putting down some kind of a credit as a hold, just so the hotel has something while Anna gets it all sorted with the lock. And as you probably predicted or already knew, none of this ends well. We know Anna always seems to land on her feet, even on her worst of days. Well, until she doesn't, but we're getting there too. Rachel Williams, on the other hand, has footed the bill for pretty much the entire trip, including shopping, dining, and even a private tour of the Majorelle Garden once owned by Yves Saint Laurent. Total price tag, upwards of $65,000. But here's the big kicker. The card Rachel put on hold for the main expense, the La Mamounia Marrakesh resort, well, that ended up getting charged to her Vanity Fair card. Of course, as an expense unauthorized by the company. And so, as the proverbial kitchen keeps getting hotter for Rachel back in New York City, things for Anna begin to cool down substantially, with the possibility of funding for ADF now about as probable as hitting the Powerball. And one particularly nasty run-in with hotel staff lands her with her room key code changed, and all her belongings save the clothes on her back confiscated and put in storage. She begins to understand Anna Delvey's NYC welcome is wearing as thin as the sensible black dress that wasn't confiscated by the last hotel she pissed off. Not even Billy could set her up with a temporary crash pad to get her back on her feet. But instead of giving up and hanging her head, she broadens her horizons towards the West Coast. As Anna hits the road and finds her way out of New York City, Billy tries desperately to steer his way clear of angry, defrauded investors and a $100 million class action lawsuit filed by the burned Fyre patrons. The suit seeks retribution for false promises and leaving attendees stranded without provisions. On the heels of that gigantic suit are 6 other federal lawsuits and 4 individual lawsuits that were filed for defrauding investors of Fyre. So it was really just a matter of time, and only 2 months after Billy McFarland's dreams were lost in the fire, he was arrested by federal agents on June 30th, 2017. And then, while out on a $300,000 bond, he had the bright idea of selling bogus concert tickets, marrying the worst of Fyre and Magnesis into a scheme called More Wire Fraud Charges for Billy. And in March of 2018, Billy McFarland was convicted of 2 counts of wire fraud and ordered to repay $26 million in stolen profits. And while that's not exactly small change to Billy or really anyone else, it's kind of a drop in the bucket compared to what he actually ended up getting from people. So he was sentenced to spend 6 years in federal prison, where he currently still is and will be eligible for parole in 2023. Billy turns over his phone and devices and prepares for the long journey to serve out his federal sentence. And we get a notification through our socials that it's time to catch Martin, you guessed it, live streaming. And during this particular session, an odd caller gets on explaining that he's from the FBI. And Martin abruptly ends the call and somewhat tactfully winds down the stream. And as bureau folk are not keen to give up so easily, Martin was arrested shortly thereafter. In September of 17, his bail was revoked and he was remanded into custody to await trial, thanks to what was deemed by the court to be a threat to the life of Hillary Clinton. Finally, in March, he was convicted of his securities fraud charges and sentenced to 6 years in federal prison, where he will also be eligible for parole in 2023. And in case I hadn't made it crystal clear before, this indictment and conviction had absolutely nothing to do with the drug price gouging that put thousands, if not more, lives in danger and financially ruined many others, or both. The laws that enabled Martin Shkreli to do what he did with drug prices were in place long before he came around and continue to remain in place today, leaving the door wide open for it to be done again and again and again. So while he couldn't actually catch a conviction for abhorrent greed or being America's most hated real-life troll, they sure as hell threw the book at him for whatever they could. 2 down so far, but the Piper had to pack up and take a red-eye to LA to call in his due from Anna. But not before things got particularly darker for her under the California sunshine. Either in a muffled cry for help, a scam to escape her expired visa, or a legit suicide attempt, Anna was hospitalized for an overdose. She landed herself in rehab at one of the #1 recovery facilities in the USA, Passages Malibu, where authorities and immigration would not legally be able to extract her. Because you can't pull someone out of a rehab facility and charge them for a crime. But that doesn't stop you from getting placed in cuffs the second you walk out the door. So out of the clear blue, she gets a call from Rachel Williams, and assumes the best from her old friend who was in town randomly. And she agrees to meet her outside the facility for lunch, where she is not met by Rachel Williams but the LAPD working with the NYPD and the Manhattan District Attorney. Rachel Williams, in spite of the many perks of being Anna's friend, was unable to let the Morocco betrayal go, and she sold Anna down the river, assisting in, and in many ways making possible, a full-on sting op to arrest Anna. I'm not saying what Anna did to Rachel was okay, but it definitely illustrates why I've been using the word friends in quotes this whole time. Finally, unable to materialize Anna Delvey as the rich, successful arts benefactress she was born to be, Anna Sorokin was arrested to stand trial for 2 counts of attempted grand larceny in the first degree, 3 counts of grand larceny in the second degree, 1 count of grand larceny in the third degree, and 1 count of misdemeanor theft of services. She was denied bail as a flight risk and eventually sentenced to 4 to 12 in state prison in order to pay back much of the money, which she was able to do relatively handily thanks to an advance she gained from selling her story. Anna was found innocent of the charges alleged by Rachel Williams, who also netted healthy profits from her story, though she did leave out the part about her role in the sting operation, both in her Vanity Fair article and her book. But it did come up at the trial, shedding a pretty sour light on Rachel. Anna's attorney Todd Spodek also heavily employed the Frank Sinatra defense in closing arguments, which firmly establishes, beyond a reasonable doubt, if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. And that is exactly what Anna Delvey, Billy McFarland, and Martin Shkreli were quite literally banking on, at every stage of their ill-fated journeys through the extreme highs and lows of the New York City hustle. It's been advised to fake it till you make it. Portray the illusion that success is not just around the next bend, that it's already arrived, and everyone else just needs to get on board with you. But what really is success? Is it just money? That's a big part of what Anna Delvey and Billy McFarland were shooting for. To do something really cool, but to do it the coolest, and bask in the resulting riches. But what would Martin tell them? He was flush with cash, but still striving for something. Was that something still success? I think the way we're sold an image of success from a young age is very different from how it actually shapes up. What's the difference between an Elizabeth Holmes and a Steve Jobs? Because I guarantee it isn't the vision, the blind ambition, or not taking no for an answer. So then is it the timing? I promise that Anna Delvey and Billy McFarland thought at any moment it was all going to come together just right. In fact, Anna has still talked about some iteration of the ADF, even from a nice facility. And they didn't just invent that attitude. They observed it in action time and time again. So is it the execution? Making something really special happen before investors start to ask too many questions you can't answer? Yet? Choosing the right friends and definitely not choosing the wrong ones? Hey, I just said I wanted to ask the questions, not that I was going to have all the answers to them. But I think it's just too easy to simply dislike these people and write them off. I think there's a much more interesting story here, about the disconnect between how success is sold and how it's measured. Because I'd personally go ahead and reach as far as to say that we don't actually value the entrepreneurial spirit at all. We value entrepreneurial success, winning. Take a show like Shark Tank and really observe how it's produced. When the guests find that deal, it's all tears, piano underscore, and a 6-month factory follow-up to check success. But when they don't, it's cringe, tuba, laugh track, and low-key ridicule. We laugh them out the door as they take their entrepreneurial spirit elsewhere to find success. And there's no 6-month follow-up. And what's the flip side? If Anna and Billy hadn't made it, we probably would have never even heard their names. Who's the founder of the Soho House? Who created Coachella? I'm not saying nobody out there knows, but I'm definitely sure they're not household names. Or Netflix miniseries fodder to be produced by Shonda Rhimes. And if Martin didn't present himself as such a smug little weasel because it just gave him a personal thrill, well, he'd probably be mentioned about as much as all the other price-gouging pharma execs who are still hard at it, legally, to this day. And most of those guys are mentioned roughly, well, not very often. Sometimes infamy is more famous than celebrity. And it can be a long way down if you don't make it up the ladder of success. Martin Shkreli, Billy McFarland, and Anna Sorkin will tell you all about it, just as soon as they have a little bit more free time. And that will wrap up episode 2 of None of What You Hear. Of course, you guys know all the stories I tell are just for entertainment only and aren't meant to be journalistic exposés or put into the permanent historical record. I try to be as true as I can to the story, but I also take some dramatic license on occasion to make it all fit together. I want to sincerely thank each and every one of you for taking the time to listen. And another huge thanks for all the feedback, and please do keep it coming. And of course, follows and ratings are great, but we'll get there. First, I really just want to know who was out there listening. So don't be bashful. It's just me, Robin. Reach out anytime at nowyouhearpod@gmail.com or at nowyouhearpod on Instagram and Twitter. Otherwise, I'll catch you in a couple weeks. And in the meantime, believe none of what you hear and only half of what you see.